Hello and welcome. I'm Garima, and joining me on the dais today is Mark LaCour, Editor-in-Chief at the Oil and Gas Global Network. With over 2 decades in the industry, Mark has a very well-earned reputation as an industry insider and an independent researcher. Today, he's an integral part of the new media and conversations in the world of oil and gas. Mark has the top podcasts in the industry, and he's someone who's very passionate about new technologies, people, and stories of this ever-evolving landscape. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mark.
I'm actually very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Mark. Absolutely delighted to have you with us. Mark, tell us what inspired you to join the oil and gas industry.
It was an inspiration. I needed a job. So up until that point, I had been traveling around the world building cell sites. And I wanted to quit traveling so much and kind of settle down. And I actually knew some of the senior people in the phone company in the East, which was called Bell South. And so I asked them, I said, look, I'm looking for a job where I don't have to travel. And they go, Mark, we have the perfect job for you, but we just want to let you know it's had declining revenue for almost 30 years. And I go, I'll take it, because I just wanted the job. And what it was every oil and gas business in Bell South territory. Nobody else wanted it. No other salespeople wanted it. So they gave it to me. So that was my introduction. And literally, I just wanted a job. And that's the job I got.
Nice. And Mark, now 20 years down the line, what is the idea of a successful career in oil and gas for you? As you mentioned, it started with on a very different note. Now, how would you explain that?
Yeah, so it's been a great journey. It's Bell was a great place to learn. The thing that was really valuable to me is I knew nothing about the oil and gas industry. And because I was given all of their oil and gas customers, I saw the whole industry. So I saw upstream, I saw midstream, I saw downstream, and I saw the service companies. And I realized how they all came together. And that's always served me well. During Hurricane Katrina, I did a bunch of work that was above and beyond. And the oil and gas industry respected me for that. And I formed relationships during Katrina that are still valuable to me today. My last corporate gig was with a research company called Forrester Research. And about 10 years ago, I started my own company, Modal Point. That led me into the whole podcasting world. And now, as crazy as it sounds, I talk for a living. I mean, I'm either being paid to speak somewhere or I'm on a podcast. And if you would have told me even 6 or 7 years ago that I would talk for a living, I would tell you you're crazy. But I have a passion for this industry, and the journey has just been wonderful.
Right. And Mark, what is the story of Oil and Gas Global Network, since we are talking about your passion for podcasting now?
All right, so I'll tell you a secret between you and me, and you're probably only 10,000 listeners that are hear this. Yeah. So my marketing guy came to me about 6 years ago and said, we need to start a podcast. And I told him, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Nobody listens to podcasts. Stop it. Go do something to make some money. And he kept on. And eventually I agreed to do the podcast just so he would be quiet, because he was annoying me. And we started the first podcast, which is Oil and Gas This Week. What we didn't know, it was the first oil and gas podcast in the world. 3 months into it, Red Wing Boots called me and said, we want to sponsor your podcast. And that's the beginning of this media empire that we're sitting on right now. And so that was how Oil and Gas Global Network got its start.
Right. Could you tell us the different podcasts under OGGN that we have today?
We have 9. I don't know if I can get them all right because we've grown so fast. So we have Oil and Gas This Week, Oil and Gas HS&E, Oil and Gas Onshore, Oil and Gas Offshore, Oil and Gas Technology, Oil and Gas Legal Risk, Oil and Gas Industry Leaders, and Oil and Gas Pitch. So that's 9 separate podcasts we have of today. We're getting ready to acquire our next podcast, the first time we ever bought one, and we're still growing. We have 7 more to launch this year. So by the end of this year, we should be around 20 oil and gas podcasts.
That is extraordinary.
It's crazy.
Amazing. It's just amazing. And it's amazing now that how people are actually listening to these conversations and commenting, sharing their thoughts. And I don't think there would be any other platform other than podcasts that would allow us to have these conversations. What do you think? Why podcasting is such a great platform today?
So it's a couple of things. It took me a couple of years to figure it out. The first one is the simplest. Podcasts are audio only. That means you can learn when you're doing something that's not real productive, such as driving. If you're driving somewhere, you can listen to a podcast and learn while you're driving, or you can listen while you're working out or while you're washing dishes. It's that simple fact that you can learn while you're doing something else that makes podcasts so popular. The other thing that happened is my generation, I'm 50, getting ready to be 55 years old. So my generation, if I wanted to learn something like snubbing, I would go to a snubbing conference, right? And spend a couple $1,000s, my company's money, hotel room, sit there for 3 days while people talk about snubbing. This new workforce that's came in around 2014, 2015, if they want to learn something, they pull their cell phone out and they go snubbing. Well, this is where the podcast lives. It lives on mobile. And so we were right there when this young workforce started coming in and they wanted to learn, and we were the only game in town. And that's what has led to our growth, is that we keep repeating that exact model where we educate through storytelling. Each podcast has a certain subject and certain people are interested in that subject. And it's a wonderful medium to convey knowledge.
Right. And Mark, as you mentioned storytelling, it's fairly a new idea in the industry. You have been doing it for quite some time now, and I have just started doing it, and many other people are quite well known. How important is storytelling in the oil and gas industry?
It's super important, not just in the oil and gas industry, but in every industry. If you want to convey knowledge, if I want to take something that I know that you need to know, I can tell you just the facts. But if I tell you a story around the facts, your brain is wired to remember that story. So storytelling is basically a way to educate in a way that humans comprehend easily and remember, versus just if I put the facts out there.
Mm-hmm. Right. And Mark, you have interviewed so many amazing people in the industry. Could you just help us understand who among them have inspired you the most and why? It's not an easy question to answer, I'm sure, because yes.
It's not. It's almost every interview I do, I pick up something. I learn something. I think about things differently. I get inspired, motivated. So there's not one that's the best, but there's a couple that stick out. The first one is a guy by the name of Jack Hinton that was head of HS&E for Baker Hughes. Mm-hmm. And he was brave enough on the show to talk about how at some point in the past, Baker Hughes' safety record was so bad they were starting to lose customers and they had to fix it. And he was chartered with fixing it. And he went to the executive team and said, look, we have to believe that as a global organization, we can go without a single incident anywhere in the world for at least one day. And they go, Jack, that's impossible. And he goes, no, that's why we can't do it. We have to believe it. So he changed the way that organization thought about safety, and their safety record went through the roof. That was the fact that he was brave enough to tell me that, whereas most executives in an oil and gas service company would never admit that. That was wonderful. The other one is the chief marketing officer and the chief technical officer at National Oilwell Varco, David Reed, who you've had on. Yes. He is such an inspiration because he's thinking ahead. He works for a big old ship, National Oilwell Varco, but he was the first person I know that told IT to cut off the ports in the firewall that were blocking Facebook and Twitter. He lets his employees use social media while they're at work. That was unheard of. He has a chief storyteller on staff. They make these beautiful movies because he's figured out it's a better way to communicate with his employees. And so he's a thought leader in this industry. And I'm humbled to considering one of my friends, but he is definitely somebody that inspires me literally every time I see him.
Right. Even when I spoke to David, sir, I could see that. And definitely, he also has his way of telling the story. He says that you should know that there is a way to tell the right story. And it is very important that you convey some things in the right manner. And he is truly making a difference. And even the NOV live sessions, I'm sure you must be following those as well. So yeah, even there, these conversations are very interesting. So Mark, moving on to the current dynamics, the whole COVID-19 situation, how are you looking at this and its impact on the oil and gas industry?
So that one's kind of heavy. We totally unexpected when the double black swan event happened, the low crude prices, and then the lack of demand for refined products and the COVID-19 lockdown. I really thought we were going to struggle to stay in business, right? Because if you're a company, you're laying off people, do you still want to sponsor a podcast? And so I was really planning that we were going to struggle, and we've had the opposite happen, where our business is booming. And it's booming because two reasons. Big companies still have marketing budgets that were slated to be spent on conferences like CERAWeek or OTC. Well, that didn't happen. And if they don't spend that money this year, they're going to lose it. At the same time, they still need to get in front of current customers and future customers, but everybody's locked down. Well, when you're locked down, you get bored. So what happens? More people are listening to our podcast. Our consumption of our podcast has gone through the roof. The number of companies that are reaching out to us wanting to sponsor podcasts is probably quadrupled since this COVID-19 thing. So from a business point of view, we're doing exceptionally well. We're growing. As somebody that has a passion for the oil and gas industry, it bothers me emotionally. I have a lot of friends of mine that have lost their jobs. I have friends of mine that are probably going to lose their houses. I'm watching companies that I've known for 20 years file for bankruptcy. And so it's almost like survivor's remorse. I almost feel guilty that we're doing so well and so much of my oil and gas industry is suffering right now. So one of the things we do is we just wrote more charity checks. If we can put a little bit more money into people's pockets that need it, it makes things better for everybody. But for me personally, it's a bit of an emotional ride because we're doing well, but the industry's not.
Right. And Mark, going by your experience, how do you think this particular event is different from the previous downturns that the industry has experienced?
Oh, it's not even in the same universe. So typically when upstream is suffering, so when the price of crude natural gas is low, downstream is booming because that's their raw feedstock. You still pay the same price for your car tires or your nylon shirts when crude is low, but that's what makes the nylon shirts. So the companies that make that are increasing their profits. So historically for us, when there's a low crude price environment, we move our activity toward downstream. For the first time in the history of the industry, you have the low crude price environment going on. At the same time, nobody's flying jets or buying soccer balls. So downstream literally has a lower demand by 20-25%. That's never happened before. That is a very scary place to be as an industry. Now, we're starting to ease out of it, but this could change this industry. This industry could go through 10 years worth of maturity and evolution in the next 24 months.
Right. And Mark, as you mentioned that your industry is booming, some of the companies are gaining from this current scenario. But if we talk about startups and small businesses particularly, especially back in India, when we speak to them, we realize that they were about to pick up and then things changed dramatically. So what would you tell them, how they can cope up and thrive through this crisis?
Unfortunately, there's going to be some startups that just timed it wrong. And the only thing you can do is realize as quick as possible that you're probably not going to make it, and then shut down operations so you can save as much cash as possible. So when it's ready, you can start again. The other thing, though, is if you just think about your business differently. I'll give you a perfect example. There's a startup out there called Hitched. And it's basically it's online logistics. So if I need a bulldozer or a backhoe or drilling mud, I can use an app and get it. Well, you would think that their business would be hurting right now. All they did is pivot a little bit and go, you know what? Because you're using the app to order stuff, you don't need as many people. So you can maintain that social distancing by working with us. So all they did is change the way they thought about what they did just a little bit to fit this situation, and their business is booming. I'm watching a lot of the suppliers of things like uniforms in the oil and gas industry switch to selling PPE, mask, hand sanitizer. So if you can pivot a little bit and take advantage of this, do it. Just be careful though. As the world is easing out of this COVID-19 crisis, a lot of that stuff that made money will be in oversupply. So we will not be that much longer where there's going to be too many masks on the market, too many ventilators, unfortunately, too much toilet paper, right? And so the price of that stuff's go down. So you got to just think ahead as a small business or startup and try to stay ahead of whatever that demand is.
Right, Mark. And taking this conversation further, how important has an online presence become for the oil and gas companies today, and social media presence?
Yeah, so if you're an oil and gas company, whether you're small or large, and you don't understand online business, you don't understand that people do research and they learn about your company and your culture, you don't understand that people want to be able to interface with you online, you're going to disappear. It's this industry, like I said, we're going to have 2 years worth of maturity happen in the next 10 years worth of maturity happen in the next 24 months. You have to have a social media presence. You have to have a good online presence. You have to be putting good content out there. I mean, one of the things that has kind of disappeared is this whole ESG thing, right? That's going to come back. And the way that you as a large company educate the world that you're not out hurting the planet, that you're probably the most environmentally responsible industry in the world is online. And if you're not doing that, you're going to disappear.
Right. And Mark, with the lockdown that we all are experiencing, a lot of changes have taken place, whether we talk about technology, the way we work, or operations. What do you think the life post COVID-19, if the time comes sooner, what do you think the world will look like?
The world, it's going to be a different place. Look at what you and I are doing right now. If this was not COVID-19, we probably would not be on a Zoom call talking about what the future is, right? This is going to stick. A lot of people, a lot of companies that did not believe in remote working have all of a sudden go, not only do we have to work remotely, it works. Why do I have this office space I'm paying overhead for, right? The one thing I am kind of curious about is the social distancing part. So even myself, I've noticed that now people don't want to shake hands. Well, that's been part of the oil and gas business world for 500 years, you know? So is that going to disappear? I don't know yet, but there's going to be some changes that are going to stick that's going to make the world different in the future. The other thing is we had this perfect storm. So we have the ability for people to fly around the world inexpensively, quickly. We have social media so prevalent because it's inexpensive, because the cost of transport, cost of connectivity has gotten really inexpensive. So when this pandemic happened, first thing, it spread quickly because we have cheap airplane traffic, but then everybody got to know about it because of social media. That's never happened before. This will not be the last pandemic we go through like this. The good thing is this is the first one we went through as a world, as humans, and we were scared of the unknown, right? That's how we are wired, because nobody's ever been through this before. Now that we've been through this one, the next one will be much easier. But there are going to be some changes. I think it's going to be remote working is going to be much more prevalent. I think social distancing is going to affect us in some ways or the other. I'm also curious about things like public transportation. When things get back to normal, are you and I going to want to get on a bus together and be mushed together? Are people who want to be sitting in coach and airlines? I think that's going to be affected too, but it's still too early to tell.
Right. And Mark, what do you think about the summits, the oil and gas conferences, OTC, Sarah Week got cancelled, and all these events like ADIPEC? Do you see them shifting towards the digital anytime soon?
Yes and no. So there's two parts of that. I have been to a whole bunch of online conferences. It's never the same as doing it in person. It's a lot of times it's not even close. At the same time, if I'm a marketing organization and I typically spend $1 million at OTC, and I realize that I could spend $100,000 and have a series of online educational interactive webinars, wouldn't that make more sense if I could market my products or services more effectively without spending all that money? So I think what's going to happen is the large kind of generic conferences like OTC are going to suffer from this. I think the smaller niched conferences, so think of something like a conference around machine learning or a conference around new ways to measure drill stem, I think they're going to actually grow. So I think you can see the big generic conferences shrink, and I think you can see more niched in-person conferences actually grow.
Right. And Mark, with this current situation, there are so many aspects. They're suddenly gaining a huge significance, such as mental health, work-life balance, and things like these did not really gather much attention before this crisis. But people are now having a proper conversation around these topics. What do you think is there in for us?
Yeah, so the mental health thing was totally unexpected. I get it. I didn't see it coming. But there's a lot of people that get a lot of good quality social feedback from interacting in person, right? It makes their day. If you're an extrovert, you get energized by being around other people. And if you already are struggling with something emotionally, and all of a sudden you're locked out at home by yourself, well, then it can amplify and it feeds upon itself. And so unfortunately, a lot of people are having issues that normally wouldn't. I think there's going to be a pretty strong reaction from the oil and gas industry. One of the things I love about my industry is that management in their hearts, and I know it's a metric, but in their hearts, they want their people to be safe. They believe it. It's part of who they are. It's wired into their core being. And so I think you can see the oil and gas industry as a whole respond and bring in more resources to help people, maybe even using technology to help track when people are having a bad day without being invasive. So I think you can see HR pick up those additional responsibilities in oil and gas. But once again, it's going to be new to them, and they're going to have to learn, and they're going to make mistakes. But keeping our people safe and keeping them working, whether we're locked down at home or not, is paramount. And like I said, I know it's a metric, but everybody in this industry wants their people to go home safe every day. And mental health is no different than anything else.
Right. And Mark, what is your message for the younger generation? It's not a great time for them to enter the industry, but yes, what would you tell them? How should they keep their morale high?
Yeah, so there's two things I want to answer. So first thing is, for all the young people that just started their career, say last year, and then this happened and you got laid off, don't hate the industry. It happens. I've been through 4 of these major downturns. It always comes back. The thing I'm most hopeful for is that, we had some discussions with Russia and OPEC, the US did, about talking about setting production numbers. It kind of fell apart, but they're still talking. I never imagined this in a million years, but if us, Russia, and OPEC can agree upon production numbers so that when the world economy takes off, we all step on the gas and up production, and when the world economy slows down, we all take our foot off the gas and decrease production, this may be the last downturn we ever go through. So for the people that got laid off, don't hold it against the industry. When things pick back up, come back. The bigger issue is all the young people that don't want to work in our industry, who think that we're a dirty industry destroying the planet. We're not. As far as I know, we're the most environmentally responsible industry I know, and we do some cool stuff. Some of the technology we do makes NASA looks like a bunch of Lego builders, right? So explore the industry before you decide you don't want to work here. We need you. And I'm not just talking about people working in the field. We need data scientists. We need drone pilots. We need big data analytic experts. And it's really cool work, and we pay really well. So if you're a young person, don't discount the oil and gas industry. Look at it. And I'm telling you, there's a lot to offer in this industry.
Right. Mark, now I would like to know a bit more about Modal Point.
Yeah, so Modal Point was my first company I started about 10 years ago, and it was a market research company. We were actually very successful. I think even today, if you go to Google and type in oil and gas sales experts, you'll still see Modal Point come up organically, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on that first page. And in the process of growing that business, that's when we started the first podcast. So at some point, about 2 years ago, I had to make the decision on whether we kept doing that business or focus my attention on the growth of the media business, which was the right thing for me to do. So I shut Modal Point down as my market research company and stood it back up as my speaking platform. So I now get paid to speak. Even during this COVID-19 thing, I lost probably 6 or 7 paid speaking gigs, but I've done 3 or 4 virtually. To your point earlier, if you would have told me just a year ago that people would pay me to get on a WebEx and talk, I would have told you you're insane. So Modal Point is my speaking platform. We have long-term plans to add more speakers to that platform. So people that are in my inner circle that have some good knowledge that they can share with people. But I don't even have time to work on that because of the growth of OGGN. But that's where Modal Point is. Started off as, Modal Point's the original company. Modal Point owns OGGN, and Modal Point has now changed into my speaking platform.
Okay. I was very curious about the history of Modal Point. Thank you so much for enlightening me. And Mark, from one storyteller to another, I have just started doing this. What is your message for me?
Keep on doing what you're doing. You're going to go back and look at some of your early interviews and you go, oh my God, that was horrible. Everybody has to start somewhere. I tell all of my new podcasters, in the beginning, you're going to be bad. I'm sorry, you are. The more you do it, the better. And the big thing is, and you've already gotten there, in the beginning, you have a script of some sort. You have some bullet points that you're following. And in your mind, you're trying to make sure you stay ahead of that so you don't get off track. At some point, you're able to relax and just have a conversation and just listen. And that's when you get really good at interviewing. And you're there right now, right? You're now really listening to me, not worried about your bullet points, not worried about your script. And that's when you start getting really good as being an interviewer. So just keep on doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Mark. That means a lot, and I will definitely follow that. I keep listening to all your podcasts and also Flipping the Barrel and the other podcasts we have in the oil and gas industry. And I really love all these people who are doing this, because I think it's very important that people like us keep on doing this. Otherwise, the global community might not be much aware about what is the real story of this industry. What is your final message for the global oil and gas industry at this point of time?
Hang on, people. It's coming back. The world will always need hydrocarbons. The future is dependent on hydrocarbons. In the grand scheme of things, I know it's hard, and I know people have lost their jobs. I know people are scared. I'm telling you, it's coming back. And I really am hopeful that when it comes back again, this will be one of the last downturns that we go through. So just hold on, people. Things will get better. It always does. Promise.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today and enlightening us about your journey and how we can all get through this crisis. It's not going to be easy, but we will have to try. And as an industry, the best thing we can do is have a dialogue about this situation and do the best we can. And you are definitely contributing significantly to this whole situation. And I am very grateful to you for joining us today.
No, this has been great. Anytime you want to get us on, let us know. I actually, the reason that I said yes so quickly is I saw your interview with Justin, who's one of our podcasters for Oil and Gas Onshore. And it was just a very well done interview, very positive. It's like, I want to play a part of that. So anytime y'all need anything, reach out to me. And if we can help you, we'll be happy to do so.
Thank you so much, Mark. That means a lot. That truly means a lot to me.
Hey, you're very welcome.
Thank you so much, Mark. I will keep in touch and see you again soon.
See you later. Ciao.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.